Good. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us this beautiful afternoon. Um, my name is Robert Shields. I'm the executive director of a nonprofit here in Alaska called the Reason and Knowledge, and we have put on this Hope Rise project as a way to kind of help folks connect in this time and to provide some hope and solutions on things that are important. And basically tonight, Wednesday night, we're kind of focusing on a roundtable discussion type of format for an hour. And I'm joined tonight with Saskia Esslinger from Teach Gardening in Homer, and Nick Moe, former member of the Alaska Food Policy Council in Anchorage. And then Permaculture Dan down in California is joining us tonight as well. So I look forward to a lively discussion. So how's everybody doing tonight?
Better and better.
Great.
So, Saskia, I'm kind of curious. You have a gardening company. You basically teach gardening. How did you get into that?
Well, let's see. I was waiting tables and gardening all day long, and I really I wanted to do something that was more meaningful. But I didn't really want to get like a real job. And I saw a real need for people to learn how to garden. And it wasn't necessarily like, I didn't have a burning desire to teach about gardening. I was actually getting a master's degree in regenerative entrepreneurship with Gaia University. And my advisor, she was like, well, you should teach, because that's how you're going to make the biggest difference in the world, is not just gardening yourself or even having a business gardening for other people. It's teaching other people how to garden. So it was really just my desire to make a difference in the world and to change how people interact with their food that they eat, so that they're producers of it, not just consumers.
So Nick, you live in Anchorage, and you used to be on the Food Policy Council, but you're not doing that anymore. What's your connection with food and the industry?
Man, I'm just part of the fan club right now. I was on the Food Policy Council for several years and worked on lots of projects, like community projects, like school gardens, and different advocacy projects, such as getting increased funding for school meals in the state. And yeah, now I'm just kind of follow all the amazing work Saskia and other people do, and yeah, just interested to hear more.
Yeah, and I was kind of curious from your perspective, because do you grow food yourself?
I do. We currently, we have a few different ways that we grow food, but one is just our deck garden that we grow peas and kale and a few other veggies kind of on a small scale. And then we also have neighbors that have a little more space that we help them out and get some of that yield as well.
Now, and you live in Anchorage, right? You're not in the hills or anything?
I am right in the heart of Anchorage, Spinard.
That's awesome. So you're doing what you can, and then you've got you're kind of organically starting a co-op. That's awesome. So Dan, what's your connection with permaculture and food?
Well, I first got interested in permaculture way back in the 80s. My friend actually in college, I think it was 81, he had a copy of the book, A Pattern Language, and he knew Bill Rowley at UC Irvine, who had the Natural Reserve System, I think it was. And anyway, I've always been a big kind of save the earth, save civilization kind of fanatic. I still think we can expand beyond the planet. I think permaculture and ham radio people and pro-space people say, if we do this, we have to keep the earth as a preserve. We have to keep the earth completely pristine, because we don't know how to make ecosystems off the planet. So it's critical we halt all the extinctions and keep the biodiversity going. So real quick, I'm putting out an ebook on Earth Day through Amazon called the Permatrail Guidebook. I want to connect all the trails in the world with permaculture and make them human rights sanctuaries, and also make them a way we can steward all the biodiversity of Earth. So that's kind of in a nutshell the Permatrail project on Facebook. And I think Earth Day should be Earth Month, actually. I'm starting a movement to make all of April Planet Earth Month from now on.
Cool.
Because it used to be Earth Week when it first started, actually. So we got shortened to a day. So we need to take over April, make it Planet Earth April Month.
Yeah, well, as far as I'm concerned, every day should be Earth Day. We shouldn't, I mean, we can celebrate Earth's birthday, or we can, some special day, but really, this needs to be ingrained into our education systems, into our lives. And, that's the only way that the behavior is going to change. And that's ultimately what we're talking about here, is changing our behaviors. One of the reasons that's motivated for these moves right now is the fact that it's not as easy as it used to be to go to the store and just pick up what you want. And here in Alaska, we have even more of a strangled supply chain. And so actually having solutions that people can do, like what Nick is doing, just on your deck, or, in a closet, or friends, those kind of things are all, all important. And then, the connection I see with, especially with Nick, is to this larger discussion of permaculture, is that food is an element of permaculture, but there's just so much that goes into it. It's all connected, and you can't really pull it out. You can't just look at food as an isolated, singular issue. And that's a key, I think, to all of the industries, because the challenge that I've seen, especially in governments and industry, is that they have this siloed mentality. It's this, I call it an effect of the laissez-faire economic system, because you look at this one thing and nothing else matters. And the earth doesn't look like that. The world doesn't work like that. And our economy is failing because it doesn't work like that. So I'm glad to have all of you guys on the call tonight, and we talk about food and the larger context of permaculture. So Dan, would you like to share with us what your definition of permaculture is?
Well, I like the triple bottom line, fair share, fair care, people care, planet care, fair share. That kind of goes along with the triple bottom line concept. And then I kind of like Peter Bain's 12 permaculture ethics. In fact, I made a clock where you can actually, put them on a clock. That's replacing the hours of the clock. At 12, hey, you can do the 12 ethics as a year calendar. I know you every day should be, Earth Day or Planet Earth Day, but you can take a little extra attention, because your mind is kind of a good servant but a bad master, and it kind of wants to cut to the laziest way to do things if you let it. And so you kind of need to question the first thought that your mind has of how to do something, and kind of use the permaculture design ethics, which are great, observe and interact, obtain a yield. I mean, I don't have them all memorized, but there's a lot of, I'm a musician, and I noticed the circle of fifths is also a 12-step circle. So maybe there's a chance to do some cool correlations. And
cool.
like
Yeah.
finding odd connections, artistic connections on things.
That's great. Yeah, I definitely agree with the 12 principles of permaculture, and I think those are good guiding principles for pretty much everything. Actually, when I got involved in the Green Party of Alaska and we were updating our bylaws, I snuck that in. So now the bylaws of the Alaska Green Party contain the 12 principles of permaculture, and I put that in there because I wanted to give them a chance to focus on practical things. I'm encouraging folks, and I think we're at a point right now where going back isn't an option. This world, when this pandemic is over, the world's going to be changed forever, and I think that's a good thing. A lot of us were waiting for this system to collapse because we knew it was unsustainable, and that we knew something better was possible. And this goes to the heart of all that we're doing with permaculture in trying to reconnect our linear economic system with the natural systems of the earth, so that we can provide everybody what they need instead of trying to provide everybody what they want. And in that fashion, be able to provide generational prosperity and do what you were talking about, is starting to heal the earth and move us back into a balanced system where we can protect the one and only planet that we know of, that supports life, at least the way we like it. So I really appreciate all of that perspective. So
Ideally, I think the Earth would be a park, and if you needed to order something, it would be made in space and delivered, and with no impact at all on the Earth's biosphere.
well, that's a very interesting, connection there between permaculture, which is basically taking care of the earth, and then aerospace, which is getting off the earth. But the value I see in the conversation and why I've tried to connect this, and I'd like your perspective on this too, Nick. In Alaska's economy is 80% oil and extraction. So as we're looking to develop new economies and stuff, and we're looking to how we can preserve what we have, and also provide us with new jobs, training, and stuff like that. I see at aerospace, especially the parts of aerospace that are directly related to permaculture, which is the critical life systems. In space, how do you grow food? How do you house people? How do you handle the waste? How do you do water? How do you all the air? Everything that we have to deal with permaculture is exactly the same stuff that most people deal with aerospace. What makes the news, unfortunately, is the big rocks, and that makes people think that that aerospace has nothing to do with permaculture and stuff like that. So the book I've been working on is a book called Terraforming Earth. Looking at how we can transform our systems and stuff. So Nick, what are your thoughts on aerospace as a permaculture industry for Alaska?
Man, I think it's a very interesting topic, and one that it's important to think long term of what we do to make our species interplanetary eventually, and the things that you do to sustain a spaceship, you do to grow your own food. But I look at Alaska as a place that is very we're isolated. If our supply chain is disrupted, 3 to 7 days of food in our grocery stores, and we've experienced that firsthand in the last few weeks when folks are going to the grocery store looking for the staples they usually get, and shelves are bare and fresh produce is hard to find. And I think there's definitely a renewed interest in finding increased food security, finding local farmers who grow food locally that doesn't have to be dependent on a barge from Tacoma and things like that. And I know there's like Arctic Harvest, Kayla's doing kind of like a short-term CSA here in South Central Alaska, and there's some other efforts going on, and all those kind of things definitely interest me.
Yeah, this could definitely this food topic and what's going on here could definitely be a show in and of itself. But so Saskia, do you with your background, your business background, you're familiar with the triple bottom line that Dan talked about, right?
Yep.
Do you want to expand on that a little bit more?
Oh.
Well, with the triple bottom line, we're talking about not just the profits. So the bottom line is usually just profits. And the triple bottom line is taking care of the earth and taking care of people first. And the profit is that, every business needs to turn a profit in order to be a business. Yep. But in permaculture, we like to think about the profit as that we want to reinvest the profits into the system, because money is an energy. And if we are taking energy out of the system, then we are depleting the system. So if we can reinvest that money into the system of the business, then we can make it more resilient.
So we're looking at the 3 keys of profit, principle, or people and planet. So basically, as we've been focusing on this transition, part of the transition is, first of all, recognizing where we're at, and not trying to be judgmental, not, people are at different places and stuff, but, we've spent the last 70 plus years in a strictly capitalist society. And so we have a language barrier to go over. And I think that's where this triple bottom line really comes in, because to me, it's all profit. But for me, investing in people is profitable. I believe that if you nurture someone to their highest calling, then you've made the best investment in humanity that you can, because they're going to be able to turn around and they're going to be able to go help people. They're going to be just happier and more productive people. Whereas what we're seeing in society now is that when you just discard people when they no longer have value to you, then you're really creating a deficit. You
Yeah.
know, you're creating a real problem for yourself down the road. And this goes to, you know, the shortage and almost like prepping is that, you know, every prepper thinks that growing food yourself is a good idea, but the community preppers recognize that teaching your neighbors how to grow their own food means that they're less likely to come after yours. And more importantly, they may be able to grow things that you can't, or,
Hmm.
you know, and this is where the community comes in. And this is what I'm really trying to encourage folks is that, you know, we may have to stay 6 feet apart from folks, but there's like social media and this, we have ways to get together, collaborate. And right now we really need to be collaborating. Our government is completely overwhelmed. Our healthcare system is completely overwhelmed, and they're trying their best. And what we can do to help them is to reduce the pressure by our dependence on them. So I'm really appreciative of the things that you're doing out there with teaching people how to grow food, and the work that Nick's doing in the schools, and the work that Dan's doing to educate people on what these principles and stuff are. So um, so going into more of a food discussion here. So Saskia, what would you say the biggest difference is between real food and what's called food products?
Well, the way I like to think about it is that real food has a soul, and processed food or food products do not. um, but that's just kind of how I see it. I think that when you are going for convenience and creating a product through chemistry, it goes beyond what we're intended to eat. And we pay a huge price for that convenience in our health. I try not to buy any processed foods. The less processed, the better. The more it resembles whole food, such as like dried fruit. Buying dried fruit is way better than buying fruit snacks, for instance, because you're really getting the whole food there.
Okay.
So
So Dan, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, you know, there's an Eskimo saying that says the best place to store your extra food is in your neighbor's stomach. I think that's
that's great.
a great saying. And you know, I also have a page called Snap into Growing Food Security, because I'm kind of low income. I'm on SNAP, which is food stamps, and people don't know that you can buy seeds, food seeds, and food plants with your food stamp debit cards. And
Cool.
even the guy at
That's really
Walmart
good
was
to
like
know.
amazed. I'm saying, you know, and when you buy these, you want to get the heirloom seeds, which I'm seeing in Walmart. Huge racks of heirloom seeds, because of course the hybrid seeds, which most of our monocrop agribusiness farmers are locked into, they will not breed true. So if that system gets disrupted, we're going to have acute food shortages, because they don't have a supply of saved heirloom true breeding seeds that they can use. They're dependent on the Monsantos, which is trying to monopolize the germplasm of the planet, which I think is incredibly scary, and that needs to be fought with seed saving and things. But yeah, those are just some quick thoughts. I've got some lentils sprouting. I just put them in some soup. You know, microgreens at home are just a great way to supplement your body's health, because if I can mention one other thing, you know, we're made of like 100 trillion cells, and 90% of those cells do not have human DNA in them. We are made mostly of non-human cells, and your immune system is what moderates that. And to have a healthy immune system is a daily challenge. You know, you want to constantly be nourishing your cellular level immune system, because, you know, this pandemic especially is showing how quickly you can become broken down, immune compromised, and gosh, people are dying in a matter of, you know, days with this virus that's going around.
So Nick, that really, the work you said you're doing on getting funding to school lunch programs and stuff like that is this discussion of funding food versus food products part of the discussion, or is it just trying to be what's going on with that?
Calories.
A lot of that work I've done was, several years ago when Alaska was in a much better spot financially with their state budget. The state of Alaska is broke right now. We've given away our oil wealth, and there's a lot less resources to work with in terms of programs like that. So, but to answer your question, I think, like one thing I appreciate about you, Robert, and the work that you do is you're not afraid to think big. And, you guys are just talking about, the economy and creating an economy that works for people and not just profits. And I think what we've, seen is, our current economy does not account for people's well-being, their health, their happiness. And if there's one silver lining that can happen with this current coronavirus pandemic is, a fundamental shift to, supporting people where they're at, and including, not just restarting the economy because the stock market will do better, but actually prioritizing, the health and well-being of people. And that, the budgets at the federal and the state level reflect the priorities and the values of the people elected. And so much of that money goes to subsidize things that make us sick, things like processed foods and, subsidizing monoculture and Monsanto and things that, and we have a revolving door in our government between the folks that regulate the food industry and the ones who are from the corporate side of the food industry as well. And I think in terms of creating that fundamental shift and creating greater power for people and food issues, we got to address the money in politics and some of this basic stuff. But if we're able to show self-reliance and support local economies and support local businesses and do that in an increased way, that's another way that we can take back the power too.
Yeah, and that's all of this is blending together when we're talking about this triple bottom line, because when you eat real food, you're healthier. When you eat a bunch of junk, you're actually creating a cost for yourself because you're going to have a higher health issues. That's going to impact the economy. You're not going to be able to work as good. It's going to impact your thinking. There's a trickle across effect when we consider these things. And this goes back to why having the permaculture principles embedded into every business practice just basically helps us keep in mind that healthy people are profitable because they're more productive. They're less burden on the system. These are all important things for people to consider. And that when you make a decision to buy a food product at a store without considering the chemicals and all that kind of stuff, you're not thinking about the long-term impacts. Greasy fried chicken might be really, really yummy, but if it causes you a heart attack and then you spend, half the rest of your life in bed because half your body doesn't work, then was it really worth it? These are some of the things that we are not taught in school about nutrition, and that's why I'm really glad to hear the work you guys are doing and the things that we have been doing. And so Saskia, are you involved in any school programs where they're trying to get gardening into the schools?
Not right now, no. We homeschool, so I homeschool my two kids. So I haven't really, it's really hard in Alaska because of the climate here to do gardening in schools. The gardening season is when most of the kids are out for the summertime. So it makes it a little more challenging, although it's definitely done.
And Nick, is there anything going on in Anchorage with gardening in schools?
I'm not aware of anything at this very moment, but I know there's a few efforts that are notable. One was kind of modeling what other states do is to create a grant fund that schools who are interested and have the capacity to handle, they can apply for a grant to build a school garden. and it kind of gives them the framework and some initial funding to get some wood and soil and seeds and to start things off. The program that I was involved with was at Windler Middle School here in Anchorage, and we had a nurse who was really active and wanted to support healthy nutritional options for kids, and also, you know, try to incorporate the garden in the curriculum. And so we partnered with the nurse. We got soil donated from Anchorage Sand and Gravel, and then we got some lumber donated from Spinard Builder Supply, and then we had volunteers come by on a weekend, and we loaded the dirt and planted the seeds, and we partnered with some of the class, some of the students to come and plant the seeds, and they made a big thing of incorporating, you know, some of the building of the gardens in their like their shop class and things like that. And so it was really cool to see, you know, them take that on and use those veggies. And that was my old middle school too, so it was cool to see that.
Yeah, that sounds great. So I guess this would be a great time to give some props to one of the nonprofits here in Fairbanks, Calypso Farms, because they've had some good success in getting gardening programs going into schools and basically using them in the summertime, but basically keeping the kids engaged. And this is the right time, especially at elementary school, if we can get kids involved in recognizing what food is, how it fuels your body, what nutrition is, all of these kind of things. I think that we're setting them up for success. And teaching kids about food and the food habits and the food choices they make, I think sets them up for you know, just being lifelong learners and more productive members of society. So back to you, Saskia. So if people have never grown food, they've just been hunting and gathering at Fred Meyer's, what would you suggest would be the first thing that people need to think about?
The first thing I would say is sign up for a class or a course, because it's not as simple as just putting a seed in the ground. A lot of people I see just build gardens like their neighbor without really thinking through what a garden needs and how they want to grow things. And a lot of times they put their garden way in the back corner of the yard where it's kind of out of the way, and then they never go visit it. People start the wrong seeds inside at the wrong times. And there's a lot of conflicting information out there on the internet, and it's helpful if you are following consistent training, because otherwise it just gets a little overwhelming.
Okay.
You know, I think that people have this idea that we should just know how to garden because maybe you've seen it done one time, but there's so much to it. There's so much to learn about the soil and plants and all of that kind of stuff.
So just watching a couple of YouTube videos isn't going to do it for you, huh?
No, no.
But you can get started. Like Dan says, you know, he's got microgreens and lentils and stuff growing inside of his house. Isn't that right?
Absolutely. That's one of the things, is that you can get started at any scale. You don't have to wait until you have your own property or, you know, outdoor space. You can start gardening inside. If you have a balcony, you can start there as long as it gets some sunshine. And then I rent a place here in Homer and have a great garden. I mean, I picked this place because it had a garden already, but if you are serious about it, you don't have to be held back because you don't own the home. In fact, I know a lot of people that have rentals that garden.
Good.
So, and then there's always community gardens as well, which are in most places have community gardens now.
So here's a trick question for you. How much, just to see if you can take a guess here, how much of your food do you grow?
Well, I'm still building this garden up because I'm renting it, and I've only been in here a couple of years. When I lived in Anchorage, I had an urban homestead. It was just a regular city lot, but I spent many years building up a garden there and was able to provide roughly half of the food for my family. Now it's probably a little bit less than that. I actually did what we call the Alaska Food Challenge, where my family and I ate only Alaskan food for an entire year. So we were able to buy some barley and wheat from Delta Junction and get a half a pig and stuff like that. But then we provided most of the other food ourselves. So it is possible to provide a large amount of your food, even from just a regular city lot.
Okay. So how about you, Nick? What percentage of your food do you grow?
You know, it's a pretty low percent. I mean, I would say 1% or less in terms of growing, but you know, in Alaska, I feel like we're blessed with a lot of, you know, ways to hunt and harvest our food. And so, you know, our freezer stays pretty full with salmon that we harvest. And, you know, our family usually gets a moose almost every year. And, you know, that's really great local healthy protein that, you know, gets us by.
Good. So you supplement your production with hunting and gathering.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we pick lots of berries and stuff too. So it's, yeah.
So Dan, how is the hunting and gathering in California?
Well, I was going to a weekly food pantry at the Methodist Church every Monday. They give away produce. Wednesday they give away about a week's worth of groceries. But that got shut down actually last couple of weeks. But I take their compost. I have a pretty good sized red wiggler compost earthworm farm going in the backyard here. We've got a pretty good sized backyard where I caretake for my friend's dad. I'm kind of trading caregiving this elder for being able to live in this nice neighborhood and house. So I could eat the worms if I had to. They're actually high protein, but I think it's more efficient to let them enrich the soil, because they just, you know, gardeners just, the soil they make is just amazing. They can, in a matter of just weeks, they'll turn, you know, kitchen scraps into this really just grower's gold kind of high quality soil. And in fact, if you run water through it, you get what's called worm tea that is like a liquid fertilizer that, you know, it's worth like $10 a gallon or something like that, I think, on the going to gardeners. And then the other thing, this is like, they're saying this is like World War II, this pandemic, that we have to step up to the plate. And, you know, during World War II, we had a thing called victory gardens, and Americans were growing about 35% of their groceries right out of their own backyards. So, I mean, if nothing else, if we can revive the victory garden concept because of this situation. Oh, and then I'm getting to know my neighbors through nextdoor.com. You know, there's a lot more activity. There's a pandemic support group on there, and I wouldn't have gotten to probably get in touch with all these great neighbors nearby if it weren't for that. And people are saying, I've got lemons, I've got oranges to give away, and some of the restaurants were saying, I'm putting together a food pack, essentials food pack for $40. It's got, you know, chicken breast and eggs and milk and all this stuff. And they just got swamped with orders. This is a local restaurant that would have probably gone out of business, but they just got, you know, hundreds of orders to make up these food essentials $40 packs that they were giving away. So we're going to be okay if we treat this like, you know, an American ingenuity, you know,
if we rise to the occasion.
Effort, you know, fight it like World War II. Victory gardens, yay.
Yeah, get that can-do attitude in there. So a little quick side note here is there's a company in New Jersey called TerraCycle, and the way they got started was they were actually collecting 2-liter bottles and making and selling worm tea.
Oh yeah.
That's how they got their started, and now they're able to process all kinds of stuff. But you could also, as an income stream, you could also use those worms as animal feed. You know, dry them out and sell them as chicken feed and stuff like that to supplement what people are doing, or even pigs. And you know, you could there's these companies out there that are mixing worms and bugs with grasses and stuff and creating organic animal feed. And that's something that's locally producible. So Saskia, so with your skills and knowledge, how much do you think a typical family in America could actually produce as far as growing their own food and
Yeah, well, it depends. You know, I think that in this day and age when people feel pressured to have a double income family, um, there isn't enough time left over for gardening. So it takes a little bit of reprioritization for people to prioritize the growing and the time that it takes to do that. Um, but you know, even with a double income family, if the both of the people are working, I think you can produce some food. But if you really want to get serious about it and produce, you know, like the Victory Gardens were 40% of the food, then you need more time. It takes time to grow, it takes time to harvest, and it takes time to preserve it. Um, so, but I think 40% is quite reasonable, really. I mean, and think about how much healthier our diets would be if we were eating 40% vegetables and fruit.
And that's actually where a program like the Alaska Commons comes in, where people have land but no time to farm it, and there's people out there that would love to farm but no land to farm it on. So making those connections and stuff is a great place, and I think it's Alaska akcommons.org. Now, Dan, do you have anything like that down in your area where people are sharing land and?
Yeah, there's this app called, I think it's gardenshare.org. And it's people that have land, they want to have people come and grow stuff on it, or people that want to grow stuff but they don't have land. It just you create a account profile on there, and so I haven't heard back from a couple people. There are a couple people nearby that, you know, look like they could use some land to farm on, and I'm able to do that with my situation here, so I'll keep exploring that. But yeah, we could totally expand that through things like Nextdoor, and there's even an app you can put on your smartphone that lets you use it kind of like a walkie-talkie without depending on the cell phone network. It's called Bridgeify, and if the cell phone network or the internet went down, you could still talk to your neighbors and say, hey, what's going on? You know, do you want to get together, or, you know, prep in place? Or so I'm encouraging people to get hooked up with that, because I took actually what's called the CERT training, the Community Emergency Responder Training. It's kind of, it's an arm of FEMA, I guess, the citizen arm, and it's you know, they mobilize these teams in case of earthquakes or other big disasters. You know, you've got the training to go out there and help and triage and, you know, mark houses safe and do all kinds of CERT activities. Pretty good program, yeah.
So was that an app or a website, or what was it that you said allows people to use their cell phones as walkie-talkie in case the cell service goes down?
Yeah, that's a smartphone app called Bridgeify, BRIDGEFY, Bridgeify. There's a few apps that do this, but from the feedback I've looked at, this looks like the best one, and it's free, and it has about a 800-foot range. But the more people are in range, the better and better the propagation becomes, and it's all encrypted, so you're not getting like unintended recipients reading the texts and things. Uses Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, you know, that's in the phone, and it's what's called a peer-to-peer mesh network, you know, kind of like ham radio, which would be another emergency communication thing that I'm also a big fan of. Got my extra class ham license, KK6 VDR for any hams out there.
That's great, because I know a lot of people are trying to figure out if the system goes down, what they're going to do with their $800 paperweight.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, what if? Yeah, I mean, these grids, these utility grids, they need to be maintained, and if people are sick and aren't showing up to do the maintenance work, we could see them having, you know, longer and longer outages. So we have to be ready to step up with our own microgrids.
So Saskia, in teaching people about this new language of permaculture and stuff, what would you say is the difference between permaculture and organic growing?
Yeah, well, organic gardening takes its model from the farm. So it is taking the idea of rows, planting in rows, and a lot of times using equipment to then garden with. Whereas permaculture actually takes its model from the forest. So we're trying to mimic the forest with permaculture in planting perennial crops and planting annuals that can support each other, and kind of like companion planting, but we call it polycultures of plants that get along well together and can support each other in their growth. So it's a completely different way of looking at gardening, permaculture is, than organic gardening.
Okay. And Dan, do you have anything you'd like to expand on that?
Yeah, I think we need to permaculturalize the whole planet, actually. And, you know, permaculture design usually deals with little lots at a time. But, you know, the ham radio uses these grid squares that are about 3 miles by 3 miles, and they all have easy little 6-character names, like I'm in DM04NE. So there's like 24,000 of these. They're called Maidenhead squares. And what I want to do is make a permaculture plan for each one of them and look at the water flows. You know, our aquifers are not being replenished because we paved over the freaking ground. You know, we need to recharge we need to have permeable surfaces that can recharge the aquifers, number one. You know, number two, we're all in a watershed. Permaculture deals a lot with water flows. You create swales so the water, you know, flows and recharges areas of the ground that start to create food forestry and regenerative agriculture. So, you know, a watershed is basically a rain basin. It's where the water flows down from the highest point to the lowest water feature. It could be a river or the ocean ultimately. But I'm in the Cayugas Creek watershed, for instance. And so if you design with your neighbors, permaculture, you know, site designs, and you're conscious of the bigger watershed picture, I think that's how we're going to really do amazing things to save the biodiversity and prevent mass extinction. So we need to do this kind of citizen science all around the world, you know, grid by grid, and use all the citizen science methods to do this. So that's the book I'm going to be rolling out on Earth Day, that we'll talk about that permaculture guide, permatrail guidebook.
Well, you and I will definitely be having some more conversations and stuff. But this brings in
I'll gladly come back and talk to you, Rob. Yeah.
But this actually brings up a good point that we've been trying to so people are busy even now, and to keep things really simple, what we've been trying to get make popular or get trending is the hashtag permaculture cures. You know, it's not, we're not trying, we're very clear it's not a cure to the virus, but a lot of the economic challenges that we're facing because of the virus would have been less impactful had we had more permaculture policies in place already. You know, this is one of those things where, you know, foresight would have been really good and stuff. But as we kind of wrap up here at the approach the top of the hour, I want to ask Nick, what is your vision of food in Alaska's future? Right.
Well, I think, you know, following Saskia's lead, you know, she's inspired thousands of people to learn how to grow their own food, to get involved in gardening, and just to think about food differently. And so I think supporting, you know, her work and getting folks just thinking about this topic now that, you know, hopefully folks have, you know, a little more free time and will, you know, use their screen time in a productive way. And I think if we, you know, can be a little more self-reliant and, you know, address some of our, you know, basic needs, people have the capacity to take on topics like this. And yeah, and I look forward to being a part of that.
Yeah, and I'm glad that Saskia has set up her business, because it can be overwhelming to folks. And unfortunately, what happens when folks get overwhelmed, they just don't do anything. And right now, not doing anything is what got us here. And so it can't be a trend for us to continue going forward. So part of the Hope Rises project is not just provide good information. We're out there trying to get projects in the ground, and the projects that we're working on the small scale are guerrilla gardening, which is basically the idea of growing what food you can where you are with what you have. Now, we've been advocating a national program called Food Patriots. And basically the goal of Food Patriots is to encourage everyone to try to grow 10% of their own food. And I think that would be a great goal for us to set as a long-term action item, is to figure out where we're at and what we're doing. There was a gentleman who did a food security survey up here in Fairbanks nearly a decade ago, and he had a hard time gathering information on what food production we were doing because he got the companies that were doing food, but people didn't generally want to share the fact that they were growing food or how much food they were growing. So hopefully this will change that, and letting people know that, you know, the best way to secure your own food supplies is also to nurture your neighbors and get to know them, and you know, try to encourage those people where they can. And then the other part of what we're trying to do, which is actually talking about the big thinking. I'm working with an international group on a project called the 2150 project, and it's basically to build 21 fully sustainable cities that can provide for 1 million people in the next by 2050. And essentially, the core part of that is what's commonly known as a vertical farm. It's not just it's a mixed-use commercial development property, but basically we have seen that where vertical farms are getting built, local living economies are growing. And it's a mixed-use development of commercial use, or there's one in Minnesota that I really like because the first floor is a grocery store, the second floor is where they process everything, the third floor is where they have the vegetables growing, and the fourth floor they have chickens. And they've got this whole biological, it really just goes back to the spaceship Earth thing here. So I want to take a moment to thank you all for taking the time to join us tonight. We definitely want to try to do more of this. This is hopefully creating more questions for folks than it's answering, and will get them thinking. So one of the last things I'd like to ask Saskia tonight is, and maybe get some follow up with the two of you, is how does gardening give you hope, or how does gardening inspire hope?
Well, it takes a lot of hope in the future to plant a seed, right? Because we are expecting to be there to get the harvest from it. So it keeps us focused on the hope that that seed is going to grow and fruit for us. So that is one of the ways. And then also I think that just being out in nature and being grounded by putting our hands to the soil. I don't like to wear gloves when I garden because I like to feel the soil. And I feel like that helps ground me and helps to calm me. It's almost like a meditation, gardening is. It's actually been proved to reduce anxiety and depression. And then there's, you know, there's all these benefits besides the food that comes out of it. So that is how I think gardening can really give us hope in this time of need, is just providing us something productive to do that can help reduce the anxiety of the unknown that's happening right now in everybody.
Well, that's really great. And then since you have a business that's teaching people how to garden, if somebody wants to check more of your sites out or maybe sign up for a class, what's the good website to go to?
Yeah, it's just teachgardening.com. Super easy, super simple, teachgardening.com. And then I also have a Facebook group called The Garden Revolution, because I think the time has come for gardens to play a more active role in our culture, and for everybody to just participate in gardening and growing some of their own food.
That's excellent. So do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share?
I think we've covered most everything. I feel like, I mean, we could go on and on, I'm sure, but I just wanted to say to Nick, like, good job doing what you're doing, and be sure to keep growing, especially with those kids. It is so important when kids are young and we think that we don't have time, but I think it's the most important time to start growing food, and to really let your kids participate in that, because if you wait too long, then it's really hard to get them, it's harder to get them engaged. So start now. Like when your kids are babies, people should be starting, I mean, before that even, but just take them into your garden in your back and let them experience everything for themselves. I mean, I have pictures of my kids eating green tomatoes right off the ground because they were just there and participating in it. And they love to participate in the garden now. And they are really good eaters as well. I think it's can contribute to their health in so many different ways. That good bacteria that they're getting in their guts, the vegetables that they're eating, and having that connection to earth. So
Thank you very much. So Nick, do you have any closing thoughts that you'd like to share?
Oh, just yeah, just thank us. That's good for that. And yeah, my daughter, who's 5 now, just absolutely loves our little garden and runs out on the deck and will grab a pea pod right from the vine, as she calls them. And yeah, it's a great opportunity to learn them up. And for me, like just to go back to your question about the importance of gardening and how it gives hope. And for me, around harvest time, it's so cool to see all my friends and my neighbors, sharing their, their bounty and exchanging cool recipes and doing potlucks, and that sense of community that comes from that, I think is really great. And it's something that we definitely need right now. And in terms of final thoughts, I was thinking a little more about you asking about school gardens. And we are facing unprecedented austerity in Alaska and elsewhere, where principals and teachers have seen their budgets cut drastically, and it's hard to I think at times to get institutions and also individuals focused on thinking bigger or outside the box. And I think our work is really important in doing that right now, and trying to create an economy that works for everybody. And if people get their basic needs met, they have the capacity to work on bigger issues as well, and they don't have to be mutually exclusive. So I just wanted to add that.
Excellent. Thank you. So, okay, so Dan, I don't want to leave you out here. So do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share with our audience before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think most of the problems that we have in society and with our human nature came because we got disconnected from nature. And gardening is going to be the basic way that we restore that connection at first. And it's we have to hold these so-called elected officials accountable, because a lot of them are just want to be opportunistic hucksters, and they belong more in Hollywood than they do in government. There's a great human services phone system. I don't know if you have it up there, but it's the 211 phone system, and you dial 211 like you'd be dialing 411 on the phone, and there's a really helpful operator there, and I think United Way or something runs it. But that's a system that permaculture people should be infiltrating and getting their resources hooked into as just one way of taking over the future for the better. That we need to do. Good job.
Great. Well, Dan, Saskia, and Nick, I want to thank you all very much for taking the time to join us and for this lively discussion. And I want to thank everybody out there in the world who's watching this and sharing it and stuff. This will be posted on the Resilient America Network, which is a group we set up to try to facilitate some of these hopeful communications as well as solutions that people can work on, while the government's trying to get back together. And so I appreciate everybody's time. I hope we're able to do this more often. And if you guys have any thoughts or questions, please feel free to reach out, post comments, reach out if you have any questions and stuff like that, and we'd be happy to try to answer. So again, this has been the Hope Rises Project Wednesday Roundtable. So we'll see you next week, and stay beautiful, people.
Thanks, Rob.
thank you, Robert. Bye.
Over April.
Have a good night. Okay.